Carl Jung was an explorer of the human soul, a visionary who understood that true transformation does not come from the outside, but from a deep journey inward. In his study of the psyche, Jung revealed to us that the suffering we experience in life is not a punishment or a curse, but a manifestation of our resistance to what we truly are. Many times we cling to relationships, beliefs, and situations that no longer contribute to our growth, simply because the fear of letting go paralyzes us. However, true liberation arises when we have the courage to deny suffering, to break the chains that bind us, and to give space to our authentic self to flourish. Self-love is not a superficial concept or a luxury reserved for a few fortunate ones. It is the foundation upon which a full and meaningful life is built. But how do we truly cultivate self-love? Jung would tell us that the first step is to confront our shadow, that hidden part of our psyche where all our insecurities, fears, and unresolved traumas are stored. When we refuse to look within, we end up projecting those wounds onto the external world. We find ourselves trapped in destructive relationships, repeating harmful patterns, and feeling constantly dissatisfied without understanding why. Think about how many times you've justified suffering in the name of love. How many times have you tolerated indifference, disrespect, or even abuse, just because you convinced yourself that it was part of loving? Jung taught us that genuine love, both toward others and ourselves, cannot flourish in a soil of self-abandonment. When you allow suffering to become normalized in your life, you're telling your unconscious that your well-being is not a priority, and that's what you keep attracting. More situations that reinforce that belief. But here's the key. The moment you decide to put a stop to it, the instant you say no more, something profound shifts in your psyche. It's as if an invisible energy begins to reorganize your life. You no longer tolerate what you once endured. You no longer seek validation where you once needed it, and you begin to discover a love for yourself that once seemed unattainable. This is not an immediate or simple process, but it is the only path to a life that is truly authentic. The unconscious has its own language, and when you ignore its messages, it repeats them to you over and over again in the form of painful experiences. Perhaps you've noticed that certain patterns in your relationships keep repeating, that you always end up attracting people who make you feel insufficient, or that no matter how much love you give, it never seems to be enough. This is not a coincidence. Jung would tell us that these experiences are reflections of our internal relationship with ourselves. If deep down you feel unworthy of love, you'll attract situations that reinforce that belief. If you fear being alone, you'll cling to people who don't value you. If you doubt your own worth, you'll allow others to define it for you. But here's a truth that can change everything. The love you seek outside is already within you. It's just been conditioned to look for it elsewhere, in others' approval, in success, in social validation. Jung reminds us that self-love is not a destination you reach when everything in your life is in order, but a decision you make even amidst chaos. It's in the moment you decide to stop justifying suffering that you begin to experience real transformation. Think of it this way. Every time you choose to stay where you're not valued, every time you ignore your needs to prioritize others, every time you let someone cross your boundaries without consequences, you're sending a message to your unconscious. I don't deserve more than this. But when you decide the opposite, when you refuse to keep suffering, when you stand firm and demand the respect you deserve, your world changes. Your energy changes. The people who enter your life change. And most importantly, the relationship you have with yourself transforms. Carl Jung taught us that the psyche is a dynamic system in constant evolution, and that our decisions, no matter how small they seem, have a profound impact on our reality. When you begin to treat yourself with the love and dignity you deserve, your unconscious registers it. You no longer let fear dictate your choices. You no longer seek validation where you only find emptiness. You start vibrating at a different frequency, one where love is not suffering but expansion. This process isn't easy. There will be moments when you doubt, when you wonder if you're really making the right choice by letting go. But every time fear tries to pull you back, remember this. You weren't created to live a life of suffering. You didn't come into this world to beg for love or settle for emotional crumbs. You came to experience the fullness of being yourself, without masks, without fear, without ties to what no longer resonates with you. Jung believed that self-love emerges when we integrate all parts of ourselves, when we stop rejecting our emotions, when we allow ourselves to feel without guilt. Because that's where true healing lies, in the act of embracing ourselves with all our light and all our shadow, in recognizing that we are enough just as we are, without needing external validation. The day you refuse to keep suffering is the day your true transformation begins. It's the day you break the cycle, stop repeating old stories, and start writing a new one. Don't wait for the world to give you permission to love yourself. Don't wait for someone else to value you before you start valuing yourself. Make the decision now because the unimaginable self-love you seek is already within you. You just need to remember it. When you start living from self-love, the world you knew begins to crumble. Not because something bad is happening, but because you're finally letting go of everything that wasn't aligned with you. It's an uncomfortable process, sometimes painful, but absolutely necessary. Jung taught us that suffering arises when we resist change, when we try to cling to an identity that no longer belongs to us. And this is where many people fail. They think self-love is just about repeating nice affirmations in front of the mirror, when in reality, it's an act of brutal courage. It's the process of destroying what no longer serves you to rebuild yourself from your deepest truth. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you felt that something didn't fit in your life but chose to ignore it because changing meant facing the unknown? How many times have you let a relationship, a situation, or even a mindset keep you trapped just because letting go seemed more terrifying than continuing to suffer? Most people choose the familiarity of pain over the uncertainty of freedom. But that's where the difference lies between those who awaken and those who remain trapped in repetitive cycles. When you finally decide to stop suffering, your unconscious understands it as a new mandate. You stop attracting relationships based on emptiness. You stop engaging in dynamics that drain you. And instead, you begin to experience a shift in the energy you project. What once hurt you no longer resonates with you. What once seemed indispensable now becomes irrelevant. It's as if you're clearing out the clutter accumulated in your soul, making space for what truly adds to your life. This process isn't immediate. Along the way, you'll feel tempted to return to what you knew. There will be days when you'll wonder if letting go was the right decision, because the new hasn't arrived yet, and the old keeps calling you back. But Jung would remind us that every deep change requires going through chaos before reaching clarity. Life will test your decision. Maybe the same person you walked away from will try to come back. Maybe situations will arise that challenge your new perspective. And in those moments, you'll have to choose. Go back to what you know and perpetuate the suffering, or stand firm and show your unconscious that this time is different. When you finally break the pattern, something incredible happens. The world starts responding in a completely new way. People who once seemed out of reach begin to appear in your life. Opportunities you never imagined present themselves effortlessly. Everything that once felt like a constant struggle starts to flow naturally. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You've raised your energy. You've rewritten the story you told yourself about what you deserve. And as a result, life is showing you a different reality. But this doesn't mean you'll never face challenges again. The difference is that you'll no longer face them from lack, from desperation, or from the need to be saved. Jung taught us that true power lies in the integration of all our parts, in accepting that we are whole beings by right, and that we don't need anything or anyone to complete us. From this place of wholeness, love stops being a struggle and becomes an experience of expansion. You no longer seek someone else to fill your voids because you've learned to embrace them and transform them into wisdom. Self-love isn't about becoming someone perfect, but someone real. It's about giving yourself permission to feel, to make mistakes, to explore who you are without fear of judgment. It's about letting go of the need to please others and starting to live on your own terms. When you reach this point, something shifts in how you move through the world. You no longer force connections. You no longer stay where you're not appreciated. You no longer negotiate your worth. And when someone tries to treat you the way you once allowed, they realize it no longer works because you've changed the narrative. This is where self-love becomes something unimaginable. Not because it's an abstract concept, but because most people never get to experience it in its fullest expression. They live stuck in the idea that they need to earn others' love before deserving their own. They live waiting for someone else to choose them, without realizing that the most important choice is the one they make for themselves. But you're not like most people. You're here because something inside you already knows you deserve more. And the question is, are you willing to claim it? It's not easy to break away from a version of yourself that's been built on the need to be accepted, loved, or validated by others. For years, you were taught that you had to fit in, that your worth depended on how much you could give, how much you could endure, how much you were willing to sacrifice for others. But at some point, that narrative stopped serving you. And now you're here, questioning why you've allowed so many things that went against your well-being. It's looking in the mirror without masks, without excuses, and recognizing the moments when you were the one perpetuating your own suffering by not putting yourself first. Jung taught us that the unconscious always speaks to us, but most of the time, we choose to ignore it. That discomfort you felt in certain relationships, that sense that something wasn't right, but you stayed anyway. Those signs that showed you over and over that you were going against yourself, all of that was your unconscious screaming that you deserved more. The question is, why do we take so long to listen? The answer is simple but hard to accept, because suffering becomes a habit. We get used to the dynamics that hurt us, the relationships that drain us, the patterns that keep us trapped. And when the time comes to choose something different, we feel fear. What will happen if I let go? Who will I be if I leave behind this version of myself that I already know? But that's where the magic happens. In the moment you decide that your peace is worth more than any attachment, in the instant you prioritize your well-being over the need to fit in, you set yourself free. Real transformation doesn't happen when others change, but when you change how you relate to yourself. Jung said that everything we project onto the external world is nothing more than a reflection of our own psyche. If you live from lack, you'll attract relationships that confirm that sense of emptiness. If you believe love is suffering, you'll find yourself in connections where you always have to fight to be seen, to be chosen, to be enough. But when you realize that genuine love doesn't require effort but alignment, everything changes. You don't need to chase anyone, convince anyone, prove your worth to anyone. True love, the kind that comes from authenticity, doesn't force you to sacrifice yourself. It doesn't put you in a position of constant struggle. And if you've lived the opposite until now, it's not because that's normal, but because that's what you learned. But what you learned can be unlearned, and that's where your power lies. When you stop normalizing suffering, your energy changes. And when your energy changes, the type of people and experiences that come into your life change too. Suddenly, the connections that once seemed impossible become natural. The respect you once had to demand becomes the foundation of all your relationships, and not because the world has changed, but because you've changed how you allow yourself to be treated. But this path also comes with a challenge. When you decide to love yourself, when you choose to stop suffering, you realize that many people around you aren't ready for that level of authenticity. Some will try to make you doubt. Others will want you to go back to the version of you they knew. And this is where you have to be strong. You have to understand that self-love sometimes means letting go of people, environments, and even habits that were once part of your identity. And that's okay. Self-love isn't arrogance. It's not selfishness. It's not isolation. It's a deep connection with yourself, with your essence, with the certainty that you deserve the best without needing to suffer for it. It's knowing that you don't need to justify your worth, that you don't have to settle for less than what you truly want. And most importantly, it's understanding that your happiness should never depend on external factors, because everything you seek outside is already within you. When you grasp this, fear disappears. You no longer fear being alone because you have yourself. You no longer seek validation because you know who you are. And in that moment, self-love stops being an abstract concept and becomes a tangible experience in how you talk to yourself, in the boundaries you set, in the decisions you make. And that's when you discover that the unimaginable self-love everyone talks about isn't something you have to achieve. It's something that's always been there, waiting for you to finally choose yourself. As you move forward on this path, you'll realize something fundamental. Self-love isn't just about letting go of what hurts you, but also about allowing yourself to receive what you truly deserve. And this is a point where many people stumble, because for so long they've been conditioned to struggle, to sacrifice, to the idea that life has to be hard and love difficult. But when you start living from authenticity, when you stop justifying suffering as a natural part of life, you face a new challenge: learning to receive without guilt, receiving love, receiving abundance, receiving respect. It seems simple, but for someone who's spent years believing they have to earn everything through effort, it can feel uncomfortable at first. Because deep down, there's a voice that says, do I really deserve this? And if you don't heal that voice, if you don't reprogram the belief that you're worthy without conditions, you'll keep sabotaging your happiness. You'll keep pushing away the people who truly value you. You'll keep rejecting opportunities that could transform your life. You'll keep believing that if something is too good to be true, then it can't be for you. But here's the truth Jung taught us. The unconscious always seeks to confirm what we believe about ourselves. If you believe you're not enough, you'll attract experiences that reinforce it. If you believe love is scarce, you'll find reasons to justify it. But if you decide to change the story, if you dare to see yourself differently, your reality will start reflecting that change. And this is where the real magic happens. Because when you begin to see yourself as someone worthy, as someone who doesn't need to suffer to be loved, as someone who deserves the best without justifications, everything in your life transforms. You stop settling for the minimum. You stop accepting what only fills the void momentarily. You learn to say no without fear, to let go without guilt, to demand without feeling like you're asking for too much. Because now you understand that your well-being isn't negotiable. At first, this change might feel uncomfortable. The people who were used to you giving in might try to make you feel guilty. Old patterns might try to drag you back. But this time, it's different. This time, you have the awareness that you didn't come into this world to endure, to settle, to beg for what rightfully belongs to you. This time, you've decided that your happiness doesn't depend on how much you can tolerate, but on how much you're willing to choose yourself. And when you make that decision, something incredible happens. You start attracting people who are on the same frequency, who don't seek to drain your energy, but share it in balance. Relationships stop being a constant struggle and become a space for mutual growth. And not because luck has changed, but because you've changed how you allow yourself to be treated. This doesn't mean you'll never face challenges again, but now you'll face them with a completely different perspective. No longer from lack, no longer from need, but from the certainty that everything that comes into your life is a reflection of what you've decided to accept. And when something doesn't align with your worth, you simply let it go, without fear, without resistance, without suffering. Carl Jung taught us that the human psyche has an infinite capacity for transformation, that we're not condemned to repeat the past, that we're not bound to the story we were told about ourselves. At any moment, we can choose to write a new chapter. And the question is, are you ready to do it? When you decide to write a new story for yourself, when you dare to let go of suffering and claim the self-love that's always belonged to you, the entire world responds in a way that once seemed impossible. Doors that once seemed closed start to open. Connections that once seemed out of reach appear effortlessly. But most importantly, you no longer need to cling to anything or anyone to feel complete, because now you understand that the only validation that truly matters is your own. Self-love isn't a final destination, it's a constant practice. It's not about a moment of enlightenment where everything changes overnight, but about small daily decisions that reinforce your worth. It's in how you talk to yourself, in the boundaries you set, in the opportunities you choose to accept, and in the situations you decide to leave behind. It's a commitment to yourself, to your well-being, to the life you truly deserve to live. And the best part is that when you change, you also inspire others to do the same. Because when one person chooses themselves, when they refuse to suffer anymore and decide to live from authenticity, they become a beacon for others. People who are ready to awaken, who felt the call but haven't yet taken the step, will see in you proof that it's possible. And that's powerful. If this message resonated with you, I want to invite you to be part of something bigger. Share this video with someone who needs it. someone who's still trapped in the cycle of suffering and needs to remember they have the power to change their story. Leave me a comment below and tell me which part of this message touched your heart or what action you're willing to take to prioritize yourself starting today. Your words won't just be a testament to your transformation, they'll also help others who read them find the courage to take their own leap. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next content.